At 5:17 local time, the carrier moved through calm water with steady, almost silent confidence. There was no storm, no heavy swell, no dramatic warning from the sea, just a flat gray horizon, the low vibration of steel underfoot, and the constant hum of a ship built to operate around the clock. On the bridge, no one spoke. Inside the Combat Information Center, the silence broke with a single tone. It was not loud. It was not chaotic. It was sharp, clean, and exact. A new surface contact appeared, then another, then 6 more, 8 in total. The radar picture tightened as the symbols filled the screen in a wide, uneven arc. They were spread out but moving with purpose. Too fast to be random, too coordinated to be routine. Their courses were clean, direct, and closing. The watch officer leaned forward, eyes fixed on the bearing data. No one rushed to speak. No one needed to ask what it meant. Condition 3 was set quietly. Key stations came alive. Doors were secured. Hatches were sealed. Across the carrier, the ship shifted into a higher state of readiness, without drama, without panic, and without a single raised voice. On the flight deck, movement stopped. A tow tractor froze in place. A yellow shirt lifted one hand and held it there, waiting for the next signal. Aircraft sat armed but still, noses pointed toward the bow, canopies catching the soft morning light. Inside CIC, the range kept falling, 30 nautical miles. 28, 26. All 8 contacts were now inside the outer surveillance ring. Their speed held steady at 27 knots. Their spacing was disciplined. This was not civilian traffic. This was not a coincidence. This was formation movement. Track numbers updated automatically. One contact shifted slightly left. Another eased right. The arc began to tighten. Not a straight approach, a net. The carrier stayed on course. Speed unchanged, heading steady. No evasive turn, no sudden adjustment. At another console, identification filters were entered. Hull profiles began to sharpen as the vessels drew closer. Angular silhouettes appeared on the displays. Tall superstructures, sensor masts, shapes that did not match patrol craft or support ships. The room remained quiet as the system completed its work. The identification appeared. Russian Navy. 8 naval vessels. No radio message came with it. No challenge, no announcement, no warning call. The contacts kept closing in silence, their wakes cutting bright white lines across the blue surface. On the bridge, the captain watched the horizon through reinforced glass. He did not raise his voice. He did not have to. The ship was already doing exactly what it was designed to do. Below, the forward deck mount turned a few degrees. Not toward any vessel, just enough to be noticed, just enough to register. Range dropped to 21 nautical miles. One Russian vessel increased speed by 2 knots. Another adjusted inward by half a degree. The formation began to reveal itself more clearly. 2 forward elements, 6 trailing behind, all angled to compress space. This was no simple shadowing pattern. This was convergence. The carrier's escorts held position off the beams, spread wide and silent. No bright warning signals, no aggressive sensor posture. Everything remained measured, controlled, and deliberate. Inside CIC, the closest point of approach was calculated automatically. Too close. At that distance, small mistakes could turn into major incidents. Every movement mattered. Every correction carried weight. Still, no radio calls came. The Russian vessels were now close enough for visual confirmation. Gray hulls. Naval flags snapping in the wind. Deck crews visible as small figures against the steel. Their systems were uncovered, but inactive. A message without a formal statement. The carrier did not slow. Flight operations were paused, not canceled. Every move remained reversible. Every option stayed open. Below deck, a helicopter crew strapped in, rotors folded, engines waiting. The green light had not yet come. Range, 16 nautical miles. The arc tightened again. 2 Russian vessels angled ahead of the carrier's bow. 4 held the flanks. 2 stayed behind, maintaining pressure from the rear. 8 ships, 1 carrier, no shouting, no sirens, no confusion. Only data flowing, logged, time-stamped, and watched. This was the kind of moment where posture mattered more than power. The carrier held its line. The sea stayed calm. The 8 vessels kept closing. Not to make contact, not to speak, but to see who would move first. 15 nautical miles. 14. 13. The Russian formation sharpened as the distance closed. What had once looked like a loose arc now looked like geometry. Calculated, practiced, intentional. 2 lead vessels pressed forward on diverging angles. Not to cut across the carrier's bow, but to narrow the space available ahead. The remaining 6 moved into position behind them with equal spacing and matched speed. This was not escorting. This was containment. Inside CIC, track history scrolled automatically. Every course correction was recorded. Every speed change was marked to the second. The system did not guess. It simply documented. The carrier held 20 knots. No deviation, no zig, no zag. A junior watchstander called out what everyone already saw. His voice was flat and professional. The contacts were splitting into two elements. No one answered. There was no need. On the bridge, the horizon still looked peaceful. Blue water, clear sky. Nothing in the view suggested that the pressure was increasing. But below that calm surface, the tactical picture was tightening minute by minute. 12 nautical miles. One Russian vessel on the starboard side moved slightly ahead of the formation. Its bow wave thickened as its speed rose. Not enough to force a reaction, just enough to apply pressure. Another vessel mirrored the movement on the port side, keeping the carrier centered. A corridor was forming. Narrow. Deliberate. The carrier's escorts adjusted station with subtle precision, widening their arcs without closing in. They did not challenge the Russian vessels. They did not fall back. They remained exactly where doctrine said they should be. Visible, capable, silent. The forward mount stayed offset, a quiet reminder without becoming a direct signal. Range dropped to 10 nautical miles. At this distance, bridge crews on both sides could see each other's silhouettes. Binoculars came up. Deck crews paused near railings, watching a ship larger than anything around it. Still no radio traffic. The Russian vessels maintained silence, and that silence was a choice. It gave away nothing, but increased the pressure. It forced everyone to interpret movement instead of words. Inside CIC, the electronic warfare console lit briefly as a low-power search radar brushed across the carrier. Not a lock, not a direct challenge, just a touch. Enough to say, "We see you." The signal was logged, frequency, duration, source. Nothing else changed. 9 nautical miles. The two lead Russian vessels eased closer, trimming the carrier's forward space. They did not cross its path. They did not force an urgent maneuver. They simply occupied the water ahead, shaping the route without saying a word. The carrier's helm stayed steady. On the flight deck, the hold signal remained up. Aircraft stayed chained. Pilots waited in their cockpits, oxygen flowing, eyes forward. Everyone understood the moment could move in more than one direction. No one rushed it. 8 vessels now defined the space around the carrier. The formation was symmetrical, disciplined, and practiced. This was not emotion. This was procedure. Inside CIC, the closest point of approach recalculated. Closer. Too close for comfort. Still controlled. Still within the line. 8 nautical miles. The Russian vessels adjusted again. Small turns. Fractions of degrees. Just enough to tighten the shape without closing it completely. They were testing reactions, not forcing contact. The carrier gave them none. No course change, no speed change, no radio challenge. This was not hesitation. This was posture. At 7 nautical miles, one Russian vessel shifted just enough to make its main deck system more visible. It remained inactive. The message was visual, not operational. The scene was logged. The carrier's escorts held their positions, systems alert, movement controlled. Everything was happening in plain sight. This was pressure applied with math, not muscle. 6 nautical miles. The space was now compressed. Any unexpected turn would ripple through the formation within seconds. Any misjudgment would be seen by ships, aircraft, satellites, and analysts far away from the water itself. The carrier continued straight through the center, not defiant, not submissive, unchanged. No words were exchanged, no flags were raised, no horns sounded. Just steel, water, and intent closing tighter by the minute. And one silent question remained. Which side would move first? At 6 nautical miles, the picture stabilized. Not because the pressure had disappeared, but because the response had already begun. There was no announcement, no dramatic signal. The carrier did not change course or speed. From the outside, nothing looked different. But beneath the surface, a shift was already underway. Quiet, layered, deliberate. In CIC, additional tracks appeared above the formation. They were not new contacts. They were assets already airborne, now repositioning. Their transponders stayed dark. Their presence was implied, not advertised. The helicopter crew received the signal they had been waiting for. Rotors unfolded, engines spooled. Deck crew moved with practiced efficiency. No wasted motion, no unnecessary gestures. The aircraft lifted cleanly from the deck and settled low over the water, nose pointed toward the narrowing corridor ahead. No dramatic climb, no sharp turn, just forward motion, controlled and calm. The Russian vessels held formation as the helicopter approached. At first, there was no visible reaction. Then came the subtle signs, heads turning on deck, small course checks, minor speed changes that did not break the line but acknowledged the new variable. This was not a display of force, it was a statement of awareness. Back in CIC, the electronic warfare team moved from passive collection to focused observation. No interference, no disruption. Just listening, precise, patient. A second low-power radar sweep brushed the carrier. Again, not a lock. Again, logged. Pattern confirmed. The data told its own story. Curiosity mixed with caution. The carrier's escorts adjusted station by yards, not miles. To the eye, their movement was almost invisible. On the tactical display, it was clear. Lanes opened, angles changed. The geometry shifted without collapsing. This was counter-pressure without confrontation. 5 nautical miles. The helicopter held steady just above the wave tops, moving along the inside edge of the Russian formation. It did not cross bows. It did not hover over decks. It simply stayed where it could be seen. Close enough to be undeniable. Far enough to remain professional. Sensors rolled, cameras recorded, everything was time-stamped. On the Russian vessels, deck crews gathered near railings. Binoculars followed the aircraft. A deck mount shifted slightly, then stopped. No elevation, no active positioning, just movement. Inside CIC, a quiet understanding passed between watch officers. They were reacting. The carrier remained the constant in the equation. 4 nautical miles. One Russian vessel on the port flank eased off by half a knot, barely noticeable. Another on the opposite side mirrored the reduction seconds later. The symmetry broke. Not enough to call it a withdrawal, enough to show recalculation. The helicopter slid forward, keeping position ahead of the carrier's bow, just inside the corridor the Russian ships had tried to define. It did not block, it observed. The escorts stayed wide, silent, and steady, their sensors feeding into the same shared picture. Every platform saw what the other saw. No single ship carried the moment alone. This was system-level control, 3.5 nautical miles. The Russian formation hesitated, not stopping, not turning away, but no longer tightening. The inward drift paused. Small rudder checks moved through the line as each vessel maintained spacing without compressing further. In CIC, the closest point of approach updated again, wider, not by much, but enough to notice. The carrier continued straight ahead, unwavering. No dramatic warning, no raised voices. Just presence, layered and patient. The helicopter banked slightly, presenting its profile clearly to every vessel in the formation. It carried no visible heavy systems. It did not need to. Its value was in what it could see, what it could document, and what every crew around it knew it was documenting. Every second it remained overhead added weight to the moment. The Russian vessels kept their deck systems inactive. Their radars stayed disciplined. Silence continued. This was the hinge point. Pressure had met resistance, not steel against steel. Discipline against discipline. One side was no longer advancing the equation. The net that had been tightening now held. And in that stillness, the balance began to shift. The formation did not break apart. It loosened. The change was so subtle that an untrained eye might have missed it. No sharp turns, no sudden drops in speed, just small adjustments, careful and deliberate, moving through the Russian line. In CIC, the shift was immediate. Track spacing increased by tens of yards. Speed differences appeared where none had been before. Vectors that once converged now held steady. The closest point of approach updated again. Wider, still close, no longer closing. At 3 nautical miles, the geometry of containment began to fade. One Russian vessel on the starboard flank eased off its line by a single degree. Another corrected too late, overshooting its mark before returning to position. The symmetry was gone. Not dramatically, but enough. The helicopter remained steady and visible. Its sensors kept recording. It did not chase the shift. It did not need to. The record was already complete. On the carrier's bridge, the horizon still looked the same. Calm water, clean sky, no obvious sign that the balance had changed. But the math had changed. The carrier held course. The escorts maintained station. They did not tighten. They did not fall back. Their presence stayed constant, patient, and controlled. They did not rush the moment. They allowed it to unfold. 2.5 nautical miles. The Russian lead vessel reduced speed again, this time by more than a fraction. Its wake softened and widened behind it. A second vessel mirrored the move seconds later. Now the adjustment was unmistakable. No one spoke over the radio. No signal was exchanged. The decision was being made without words. Inside CIC, the watch officer marked the timestamp. The moment pressure stopped increasing. The moment intent shifted from compression to preservation. Another update flashed, closest point of approach expanding steadily. The helicopter banked once, slow and controlled, then resumed its parallel track. It did not press closer. It did not pull away. Its role was complete simply by being there. At 2 nautical miles, the Russian formation no longer defined a corridor. Gaps appeared where there had been none. The rear elements began drifting outward, opening space behind the carrier instead of sealing it. This was not a dramatic retreat. This was disengagement. The difference mattered. Retreat is reaction. Disengagement is calculation. The carrier continued through the center of the loosening formation unchanged. It did not chase the opening. It did not exploit the shift. It simply proceeded. The sea remained flat. The air remained still. Only the wakes told the story. 1 Russian vessel broke alignment by a full degree, then 2. Another followed, widening the arc. The net that had surrounded the carrier stretched thin, its tension released. Inside CIC, no one celebrated. There was no visible relief, no emotional release. This was not a victory scene. It was resolution. The helicopter began a gradual climb, increasing altitude just enough to show that its immediate role was ending. It stayed within sight, but no longer held the center of attention. The Russian vessels responded in kind, making small course changes that increased separation without announcing anything. No flags changed, no messages were sent, no statements were made. On the flight deck, the signal came to prepare for resumed operations. Chains stayed in place for the moment, but the posture shifted. Pilots relaxed slightly. Deck crew returned to motion with the same measured control as before. 2 nautical miles. The Russian lead vessel altered course away from the carrier's bow. Not sharply, just enough to clear the forward arc. Another followed, then another. The sequence unfolded without urgency. Inside CIC, the tactical picture cleared. 8 tracks remained present. None were converging. All were slowly diverging. The carrier passed through the space that had been restricted only minutes earlier. Its path was open again. The escorts held their lines, ensuring separation, ensuring clarity. The moment stretched, then it passed. That was how it ended. Not with a dramatic turn, not with a public declaration, but with a quiet acknowledgement that the calculation had changed. The Russian vessels did not need to announce anything. They chose to disengage, and the carrier never altered course to make them do it. The carrier never looked back. As distance opened, the Russian vessels remained visible on radar. Then they became faint shapes on the horizon. Then they were only symbols fading near the edge of the tactical display. Their courses separated gradually, disciplined even in distance. No sudden movements, no pursuit. Just space returning to the sea. On the flight deck, operations resumed. Chains came off, hands signaled, engines came alive. 1 aircraft moved forward, then another. The normal rhythm returned without ceremony, as if the entire pause had been only another part of the day. Below decks, logs were finalized. Every bearing change, every speed adjustment, every radar sweep. Nothing was exaggerated, nothing was dramatized. The record spoke for itself. Inside CIC, the ship eased from heightened readiness back into watch. Screens stayed alive, sensors remained alert, but the compression was gone. The picture was clean. The helicopter returned to the deck, rotors slowing as it settled into place. No applause, no commentary. The crew unstrapped and moved on to the next task. The footage it collected was already archived, time-coded, and stored across multiple systems. It might never be released. It did not need to be. The escorts quietly returned to their standard screen. Their spacing moved back toward doctrine. Their role remained unchanged. They never moved to confront. They never needed to. This is what control looks like. Out on the water, the Russian vessels held their distance. Their formation loosened further. They were still present, but they were no longer shaping the space around the carrier. The encounter was over, not because someone had to win, but because nothing else needed to happen. The carrier continued on its planned track. Speed steady, heading unchanged. To anyone watching from far away, it was just another gray hull crossing an empty ocean. But inside the ship, the meaning was understood without being spoken. 8 naval vessels closed in. No exchange followed, no course was altered. The outcome was not decided by raw power. It was decided by posture, timing, patience, and control. By a system that did not rush, did not flinch, and did not surrender the moment. This is not the kind of encounter that always makes headlines. There are no dramatic images, no damage reports, no official speeches, and yet it will be studied. Not for what happened, for what did not happen. The data will be reviewed, the formations will be analyzed. The decision points will be examined by officers and analysts who measure outcomes in margins, minutes, and degrees. Every quiet choice will be weighed against every alternative that was never taken. Because this is how modern naval power often works. Not always through motion, sometimes through restraint. The sea returned to normal. The horizon stretched wide and empty again. The carrier moved forward, unchanged, its wake dissolving into the blue behind it. Somewhere beyond that horizon, 8 Russian vessels continued on their own course, having tested a boundary and found it still in place. No words were exchanged. No flags were lowered. Only a silent understanding remained, carried away across open water. 8 naval vessels closed in, and then the balance shifted.